conduct was wrong. He has admitted to it, and he should resign from the Senate.
Franken's office says he will make an announcement tomorrow. It's widely believed, and it's probably true, that he will announce he is leaving the Senate. Many on the right are reacting gleefully to all this, to what's happening to Franken, and you can certainly understand the impulse. Franken was a mediocre senator and a thoroughly miserable person. Cruel to those beneath him, narcissistic, monumentally self-righteous, Al Franken should have been exposed years ago for the nasty poser he always was. Instead, he was celebrated by the media. He was protected by a Democratic establishment that found him useful. Very few people who knew Al Franken personally, including me, are mourning his departure from Washington. Good riddance. But there is a downside to all of this, and it ought to worry anyone who cares about justice or due process, or for that matter, living in a free country. Today's calls for Franken's resignation were sparked by a new accusation that he tried to kiss a woman against her will 11 years ago after a radio interview. It certainly sounds plausible. On the other hand, the allegation is unproven. Worse, it's anonymous, and that means that Franken can't really answer it. None of this would pass muster in a court of law, but in a trial by social media, and that's what we're seeing, it's enough to destroy a reputation, a career, a life. So enjoy the schadenfreude, the pure animal thrill of watching a powerful person knocked from a high perch, but at the same time, ask yourself, what if this happened to you? Imagine being accused by someone whose name you didn't know of something that supposedly happened more than a decade ago. How would you respond? How could you respond? What if you were innocent, by the way? And what if nobody cared? Our entire justice system was designed to prevent moments like this. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to face your accuser, just as Roman law did 2,000 years ago. There's a reason for that. There can be no justice without transparency. Democrats have abandoned that ancient right, attacking any who assert it, because they sense political gain in doing so. Losing Franken right now costs them nothing. Another, likely more liberal Democrat will be appointed to take his place. And a vote to expel Roy Moore from the Senate next year will be a lot easier to hold if Democrats don't have to account for Al Franken. This isn't principle. In fact, it's the most cynical kind of politics. And if you don't believe it, look no further than New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who was the first to demand Franken's resignation today. On the subject of harassment, Gillibrand is an opportunist and a phony, and so are many around her. When it was convenient for Gillibrand to give cover to a sexual abuser, she did it enthusiastically. Unlike Al Franken, former President Bill Clinton has been credibly accused of rape, forcible rape. Gillibrand didn't care. In 2013, she tweeted, quote, "Happy birthday, President Bill Clinton, exclamation point. Thank you for your friendship and support as well as your incredible leadership, another exclamation point." In April of last year, Gillibrand said she was, quote, honored to campaign alongside Bill Clinton in New York. At the Democratic National Convention, she even posted a picture of Clinton with his arm around her. Now she calls the former president a sexual predator. She says he should have resigned 20 years ago. But we haven't learned anything new about Bill Clinton. Nothing has changed except for Gillibrand's own political calculations. She is a fraud, as are many of her colleagues who came out against Franken today. They all covered for Bill Clinton, too. It would be interesting to know how the Democrats making windy statements about the horrors of sexism treat actual women back in their actual offices. If any staff are watching tonight, any Hill staff, reach out and let us know. Sexual harassment is not the only kind of abuse that staffers put up with on Capitol Hill. Just because you're female and claim to be a feminist doesn't mean you don't throw staplers at the women who work for you. That kind of thing happens regularly, as everyone who lives here knows. Let's stop pretending. And above all, stop the nauseating hypocrisy and the self-righteousness. What goes around definitely comes around. Remember that. Christy Setzer is a Democratic strategist, president of New Heights Communications, and she joins us tonight. Christy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Last thing I want to do is put myself in a position to appear to defend Al Franken, whom I know well and have never cared for. Don't think he was a good senator. Think he's kind of creepy. This is all plausible as far as I'm concerned. But I'm very struck by a couple of things, and one is the pivot that the entire Democratic conference in the Senate seems to have made. A year and a half ago, they were defending Hillary Clinton, who everyone knows attacked the women who accused her husband of sexual harassment and assault. She attacked them, belittled them. And they were defending her, and today they're saying, on the basis of anonymous accusations, that they can't even bear to serve with Al Franken. Where were they a year and a half ago?
Okay, so there's a couple things wrong with that statement. First, I think we can all agree that it would be better off if the women were in charge.
Really? Because I see a lot of women who are covering for sexual harassment here. And so I don't think that's necessarily true at all. It depends on the woman.
Yeah, so I think, okay, so here's what is wrong with that statement. One is that we are, again, in a different moment from when even Senator Gillibrand had not yet come out against Senator Franken, and today when she has. We were talking about one accusation, and now we're talking about 6, 7, 8, and they're not actually anonymous accusations. These women have really put themselves out there at, the potential for great personal cost.
Look, again, there's no way you're going to put me in the position to defend Franken on anything. The fact is, I think the majority are anonymous. I'm sure they're all true. Most accusations are true. My only point is they're not all true, and that's why we have due process and with justice system, and we don't.
They're almost all true. I mean, the rate of false accusation for sexual harassment, sexual misconduct
is unknowable. So we're not going to pretend we know that.
No, it's considered to be about 2%.
I don't. You can't know that. And as someone who was falsely accused of a crime, I can say it happens. I don't think it's very common, but it happens. The point is, we have a justice system for a reason, which is not everyone tells the truth all the time, as we all know. But you're dodging my central point, which is Bill Clinton was accused far more credibly than Al Franken has been, and of much graver crimes, including forcible rape by Juanita Broaddrick. And I guess my point is really simple. Until Juanita Broaddrick is invited on CNN and treated respectfully in an interview, which she never has been that I know of, I can't take this seriously.
That's interesting. Because, for one thing, I believe, and we've actually talked about it on this program, there has been a bit of a reckoning within the Democratic Party to say, if we were in this moment now that we were, if we had this moment 25 years ago that we're having now, we actually probably would see some of Bill Clinton's misdeeds a lot differently.
I think that's right.
I think that's true. However, I think there is a big problem in looking at this through such a narrow lens that we forget that the man who is sitting in the Oval Office had what, 20 women come out against him?
So, look, but again, we're not peering through the mists of time here, back 25 years to the Democratic primary of '92. What we're looking at is last year in the presidential election, where Kirsten Gillibrand and all these other people jumping up and down self-righteously about believing the women didn't believe the women and took the side of someone who attacked the women for the crime of accusing someone of sexual harassment. And my point is, like, why should I take anything you say seriously, Kirsten Gillibrand, when you were doing this a year ago?
Because there's a huge contrast right now between what seems to be the Republican Party's official motto of the women are all liars, literally the position of the White House, was something that they've trotted out Sarah Sanders.
That's not my position at all. I don't think most women are liars. I mean, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I mean that. I'm just saying, specifically in the case of the United States Senator from New York who took Hillary Clinton's seat and campaigned for her a year ago. To jump up and down and say, I can't serve next to this man, when she just provided cover for someone accused of rape, knowingly provided cover. It's like, where's the credibility? Honestly, where's the credibility?
Well, I mean, look, I think the credibility is in what she's. And again, I'm not affiliated with, Kirsten Gillibrand.
No, I know you're not. I'm not saying your fault. I'm just sincere questions.
No, I mean, look, I think that she feels sincerely about the issue. She certainly, led the conversation on military sexual assault. I think that this is something that she personally feels very strongly about.
Then why didn't she say anything when it mattered? See, the thing is, Franken doesn't matter. He'll be replaced by the Democratic governor with someone else. It's all fine. But it mattered last year when a woman who attacked self-described victims was running for president, and everyone gave her cover.
Because Hillary Clinton didn't do anything.
Yes, she did.
No, I'm sorry.
She attacked Monica Lewinsky as a crazed stalker. I was there. The White House called me when that happened. I was a reporter covering it.
Yeah, but you don't think that she was acting as a wife who was angry at her husband and
So do wives get a pass? If your husband's accused of rape, it's okay to attack the woman who accuses him?
But I think that you see it very differently than you would as that she's got some machine behind her that's, out to attack the women.
I don't think well, first of all, there was a machine attacking the women and destroyed many of their lives, including Monica Lewinsky's life. She didn't do anything wrong, and Juanita Broaddrick's life. But let me just end on this. If this is a sincere turnabout, a change of position, a change of heart, then why aren't we seeing Juanita Broaddrick on CNN right now or MSNBC being interviewed respectfully.
Because Juanita Broaddrick has nothing to do with the current political moment. She has no relevance to the news right now. You know who does?
Oh, really? Because she was accused of, she accused someone of, and that's being
Donald
completely,
Trump.
that's being covered. But poor Juanita Broaddrick had her life destroyed for the crime of getting in the way of a Democratic politician. I think it's time to atone, don't you?
I'm sorry. I think that, yes, we can and have had that conversation. Michelle Goldberg wrote about it. At the same time,
Goldberg.
At the same time, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, they're not running for anything right now.
Well, you know,
Roy
I don't
Moore
know.
is.
It matters when you destroy people, I think.
So I think
Call me
that,
crazy.
you know, when the president's ready to resign.
Christy, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Julie Alvin is Senior Digital Lifestyle Director at Time, and she joins us tonight. Julie, thanks for coming on.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I just said a minute ago that it's what I really think. I think it's what most people think, that most people accused of misdeeds are probably guilty of the misdeed or some version of it. You know, I don't think most people are innocent who are accused. But I keep thinking of Al Franken, putting myself in that position. I don't like Al Franken. I don't agree with his politics. I'll be glad when he leaves D.C. But put yourself in his position. If somebody said, Julie, someone whose name I'm not going to tell you has accused you of something, of a misdeed 11 years ago, wouldn't you say, kind of hard to respond unless I know who the person is? There is a kind of unfairness about that, and I think we should be honest enough to admit it.
You could focus on that unfairness, but you could also focus on the fact that this is not one isolated incident of one accusation against Al Franken. This is one of many of which there's photographic evidence. There are people who are on the record. There is corroboration from various sources. So, you know, if this were one sort of random person who we had no reason to believe based on other circumstances, then I might be more upset about this as Al Franken, but this is a
point. Actually, let me just agree with you. It does seem like a pattern, absolutely. But the reason I'm bringing it up now in light of the Al Franken story is because we've seen other examples where random people with no pattern at all have been accused of felonies anonymously. I'm thinking of the Duke rape case, for example, or the UVA rape case that Rolling Stone wrote about. Both of them were lies. And in both cases, the person who made the accusation was granted anonymity by the media. And that anonymity allowed the lie to persist and crushed people and wrecked their lives. And my question is, why should the media go along with this? Why should we prejudge, in effect, criminal charges by granting one side anonymity and naming the other?
Well, I think that this is really incumbent on the journalists here to be extremely careful in their vetting processes. And obviously, the UVA story in Rolling Stone was a huge example of an anonymous source gone awry, but it really is on the journalists to do extensive vetting, to corroborate, to fact check. And those were failures. I'm not saying that this is a totally perfect process and that anonymous sources never go wrong or never, you know, exaggerating or not telling the truth. But I think that the instances where they are telling the truth are those instances that allow things like this Me Too movement, this reckoning of us learning about the rampant sexual harassment happening in Washington and in Hollywood and in journalism. And, you know, those are cases propelled by anonymous sources, much like cases like Watergate or the Pentagon Papers were propelled by anonymous sources.
Again, let me half agree with you, because I think you're making a smart point. There are plenty of times where you see justice done with the help of anonymous sources. That's real, and I've seen it. But I hope you'll be honest enough to concede that you open yourself up to the potential for real abuse, where you empower people when you grant them anonymity to make reckless claims and crush people. And maybe in the media, our job isn't to do that. Maybe it's just to present the facts as we know them, rather than to take a side about something, the truth of which we can't really know.
I see your point, but I think that what's more important here is less the few cases of abuse that are made by people using anonymous sourcing incorrectly and journalists improperly vetting, and more the actual cases of abuse that are unveiled by anonymous reporting, whether that is these sexual harassment scandals, whether that is, you know, cases of anonymous sourcing in the past. So yes, there can be abuse of this system, but I think by and large that does not happen. Journalists are particularly careful about it.
Okay, but the difference between using an anonymous source to prove, say, corruption and one to allege sexual harassment is, in the case of corruption, you're never just going to go on the word of someone anonymously. You need corroborating evidence, documents, actual evidence that the crime took place. In the case of sexual harassment, it's enough just to have someone's word. And so that raises, if you're going to destroy someone's life, why shouldn't that person have a right to look into the face of the person making the accusation and explain himself? That's like the essence of justice, isn't it?
Well, I think that if this goes to a court of law, if Al Franken's sexual harasser goes to a court of law and accuses him of sexual harassment, then they will need to do that not under the veil of anonymity. But in this case, this is a case of journalism. This is a case of, blowing the top off of this horrific sexual harassment that women are experiencing around the world. And right now, I think it's necessary. If we're talking about a court of law, that's a different story.
But finally, shouldn't we be really upset about those rare cases where the innocent are prejudged and destroyed? Shouldn't we really care about that? Not just give it lip service, but be troubled by it?
Yes.
And
we should.
B, shouldn't we acknowledge
those cases are rare?
Well, I don't know how rare. We don't really know that. I think they're rare. I agree with you.
Your previous guest, Christie, said about 2%, and that's the stat that I've seen as well.
I'm not going to. That's a made-up statistic. But we don't really know. I agree they're rare. But the point is, shouldn't we acknowledge how much power we have in the media to destroy people, to really direct their lives, make their kids not like them? And shouldn't we take that power seriously?
Absolutely, and I think that I absolutely agree. I think that it needs to be taken very seriously. I think that the use of anonymous sources needs to be taken very seriously, but I don't think that they can be disregarded, and I don't think that the power of anonymous sources to tell really important, crucial stories that may not otherwise be told should be disregarded, because this is how we learn about things that the public deserves to know about.
I disagree with you, but I think you've made some smart points, and so I appreciate your coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
We were told we needed to investigate Russian collusion, but then Robert Mueller's investigation doesn't seem to be about Russian collusion anymore. What exactly is it about? We'll ask a former federal prosecutor about what's... Former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn pleaded guilty last week to the charge of lying to federal investigators. In his account of the crime, Special Counsel Robert Mueller described how Flynn had reached out to Russian officials during the presidential transition period, apparently for the first time. In other words, Trump's staff began talking to the Russians after the 2016 election. But wait, doesn't that pretty much invalidate those claims, the one you've heard for more than a year, of collusion with the Russians? It appears that way. So if this investigation is no longer about Russian collusion, what exactly is it about? Andrew McCarthy is a former federal prosecutor and a contributing editor to National Review. He's thought a lot about that question, written about it, and he joins us tonight. Andrew McCarthy, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, thanks for having me.
So the details are emerging from all kinds of directions all the time in this story. And so it's easy to lose track of the core point of this. And my understanding was this investigation was designed to determine what influence the Russians had on the 2016 election. Is that no longer the point?
Well, I think ostensibly it's still the point. If you ask them, they would tell you that they were conducting still a counterintelligence investigation of Russia's meddling in the election, with a sideline into whether there was Trump campaign collusion in it. My own view, for what it's worth, is that that's the guise under which the investigation has gone forward. Really, what a lot of people on the Democratic side wanted to do was assign a prosecutor to the Trump administration. This was a pretty good reason to do it. But where I think they're headed is an obstruction of justice investigation, and collusion's pretty much gone by the boards, at least as something that's potentially actionable in the way it charges.
So the charges would stem from behavior conducted during the investigation itself?
Correct, a process crime, just like the two pleas to the two guys who pled to lying to the FBI agents. Right. That's a way of obstructing the investigation. I think the ultimate target is Trump, and their theory is that he knew that there was this investigation into his campaign that potentially would be compromising with Russia. I should say here that this isn't my theory. This is what I think their theory is.
Yes.
That Flynn had this contact with the Russian ambassador, that Trump leaned on Comey to go easy on Flynn or to drop the investigation on Flynn because Trump was worried that it would bounce back at him, and that when Comey didn't do that, ultimately Trump fired Comey as part of the obstruction. I think it's got a lot of holes in it, but I think that's where they're going.
So I guess what bothers me about it, and I'm obviously not in favor of lying to anyone ever, but it doesn't sound like in the end we're going to see the kind of core crimes exposed. It doesn't seem like this has anything to do with what we're told it was about. And it also seems like, to some extent, if you threw an investigation like this at anybody, you might be able to, and I'm not defending the behavior, the dumb behavior of some of the Trump people, really dumb behavior. On the other hand, They could do this. Could be done to anybody, actually, if you wanted to do it to somebody. Am I overstating?
No, you're right. This is why I was so upset at the beginning, Tucker, that they carried this as a counterintelligence investigation, because counterintelligence is just an information gathering exercise. The regs, when you appoint a special counsel, say you're supposed to describe the offenses that require a criminal investigation and that the Justice Department is, for some reason, recused from. And the importance of that is that a criminal investigation has a beginning and an end. It's got concrete elements that you know you have to prove the transaction that's being investigated, whereas counterintelligence can go on forever. And in some sense, because it's about threats to the United States, it probably should go on forever.
Right, that's right.
So if you're going to attach a prosecutor to someone and you're not even giving them notice of what it is that's being investigated, it really becomes almost like a general warrant under the Fourth Amendment that is the reason we have the Fourth Amendment.
So, I mean, if we come away from this, whatever happens, with half the country believing this was, in effect, a coup staged by the permanent class, the ruling class, against a president they didn't pick, if people really believe that, that's a disaster. And shouldn't the Justice Department be doing everything it can to make sure that people don't think that they think this is legitimate?
Well, I think we have to let it play out, Tucker, before we make a judgment about what people will think about it. Because for all the heavy breathing that's gone on now, there's been 3 sets of charges. One indictment that doesn't have anything to do with the 2016 election or President Trump. Right. And 2 process crimes that also don't have anything really to do with the election or Trump. So there's a lot of noise, but if that's all it is at the end, I don't know what people will make of it, except that it was probably a waste of time, and it was very bad for the country because it's hard for an administration to govern when everybody has to look at everybody else like a potential suspect.
That's right. And that's the problem. Administrations come and go. You just don't want it to hurt the country. That's the danger.
You want good people to be willing to serve. You don't want them to think a week into the job they have to lawyer up.
Yeah. I'm beginning to think that. Andrew McCarthy, thank you. That was really interesting. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
One group thinks we can fix the world's problems by abolishing all countries and borders and implementing what they're calling a single global democracy. We'll talk to the founder of that group next. Will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move its embassy there from Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, the administration also announced it will pull the United States out of a UN immigration compact, saying the compact is incompatible with its efforts to restrict immigration and enforce American border security. Some people think enforcing borders is exactly the wrong idea. In fact, they dislike the idea of borders themselves. Peter Sherman founded the Group One Global Democracy, which advocates for abolishing countries and borders and instead creating a single world government where everybody gets a vote. Peter Sherman joins us tonight. Peter, thanks a lot for coming on. I don't know if you can hear me, Peter. I think we may have an audio problem. We were in different worlds, ironically, there for a minute. As I said, Peter Sherman runs a group that would like to abolish all countries and give each person a vote. We're going to take you to a Fox News alert as we fix the audio. We've got dramatic footage of massive wildfires that are ravaging the west coast of California, specifically Los Angeles. Take a look at this exclusive footage shot this morning by someone we know who was driving to the airport, LAX, both sides of the interstate, on fire. Throughout the day, matters got even worse. More than 80,000 acres have burned. Police eventually forced to close Interstate 405. Fox correspondent Will Carr is in Bel Air, one of the prettiest places in L.A. Will, how is it?
Well, Tucker, fire crews are keeping a close eye on this community tonight after what can only be described as a terrifying day for the thousands of people that live in this community. The fire broke out around 5 this morning. It really exploded. 4,600 people had to evacuate this area. It burned 4 homes to the ground, including this home. You can see where it's gutted. It's still smoldering, and we were here when these homes were going up in flames. Take a look at what we saw. We're in the Bel Air community just east of the 405 here in Los Angeles, and you can see that this neighborhood is under attack from these flames. Firefighters doing everything they can to try to salvage these homes and protect the homes near this. What you're looking at is this home was hit by an ember. It was fully engulfed. The firefighters are spraying this and the homes in the surrounding area down. The entire neighborhood is under mandatory evacuation. You can see the smoke has set in here, clouds of smoke all the way up and down this street. To an extent, it looks like Armageddon with the flames jumping out of these homes. This is an incredibly dangerous situation that is continuing to play out. And with that in mind, the biggest concern moving forward is the Santa Ana winds that are going to continue to blow throughout the course of the night and the rest of the week. And with that in mind, they've actually closed 265 schools for the rest of the week. Tucker.
Will, did authorities see this coming? I mean, watching the wildfire on both sides of the 405 this morning, a major freeway in Los Angeles, you got the impression no one was fighting the fire at that point. Was anyone?
Yeah. It was so early in the morning, around 5 a.m., and the difficulty with these winds is they just pick up the embers. They can push them miles down the road, so it's really difficult, if not impossible, for firefighters to predict exactly where the next fire will break out. But I do have to say, these firefighters did a fantastic job getting up into this neighborhood. These are multi-million-dollar homes. They were able to come and save so many. Like I said, 4 were destroyed, but there were so many that were in the path of this fire. They really did a great job of saving so many homes, Tucker.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck out there.
You bet.
Well, it's increasingly accepted, the wisdom of this age, is that everybody is allowed to define his or her own identity. Your gender is not determined by your chromosomes. Race is a social construct, not a matter of genetics. Jadu is simply taking that wisdom to its logical conclusion. Born a white male named Adam Wheeler, Jadu now identifies as a Filipina woman and joins us tonight. Jadu, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tuck.
So I'm not here to mock you, but just to ask you sincere questions. Among them, what does your mom think of this?
Well, you know, she did eventually find out with, you know, all the stories going on about me and about my group. Yeah, she's kind of still trying to come to the realization that I'm not exactly joking.
That you're not joking that you went from being a white man to a Filipina woman.
Well,
I mean.
Sorry, I'm sorry for.
So what did she say? Did she accept that?
Well, she saw one of the stories that went on about me, and you know, she came in the door, you know, like hysterically laughing, and I didn't know what was going on. I came downstairs, and she's holding a phone with a video that was made about me on YouTube. And she was just, you know, cackling, saying, "This is the best thing ever." And you know, I can reflect on myself in the third person, and I can see why it's silly, and it is silly.
It sounds like she doesn't take it that seriously.
Yeah, and I try,
so do you take it seriously? I guess the reason I want to talk to you was, I've always wondered if we are telling kids, or if adults are agreeing that you can change your sex, why not change your race? Why would that be not allowed? Why would we consider that impossible?
Exactly.
When did that occur to you that you wanted to do that?
Well, in short, you know, the Filipino culture just kind of resonated with me, and you know, again, I can see I can look at myself in the third person, and you know, I understand it's silly. And you know, identity issues are issues. You know, it's a very small part of myself, as well as my transsexuality. But you know, a lot of people like yourself, you know, find it interesting, and I'll talk about it.
Well, I just think it's interesting that things that we thought were immutable and that scientifically remain immutable, like your sex or your race, now we're saying that you can change. I wonder, since you believe you've changed your race, do you think the rest of us spend, or the left particularly, seems to invest so much significance in race. You're this race, you're this race. Each one is very different from the other. That's kind of the whole point of being a progressive now. Do you think they put too much emphasis on race?
I think they do, and I think in some instances they use race as kind of a basis to divide people, and I'm talking about what's it called? And I'm talking about intersectionality, where you have two people that are all of a sudden enemies just for simply existing. You know, I don't like that. You know, I wish people would just talk to each other instead of trying to silence each other with you know, draconian systems that they try to implement into laws.
Well, they must be deeply, I mean, I'm surprised I'm saying this, I agree with you completely. They must be deeply offended by you then.
Exactly. You know, I tell a lot of people that, you know, the LGBT community and you know, there are some left communities as well that aren't as tolerant as they may seem. I actually think a lot of the same things you do. I'm just a little bit weird.
Yeah. That's fair to say. I mean, yeah. I mean, your mom agrees. So I don't think it's news to anyone. So, like, we give all kinds of rewards based on race, and then we also punish on the basis of it. And you're saying, you're breaking the rules by saying, well, then I'm just going to change mine. I mean, that must drive the people who are making these rules totally crazy.
I suppose so. You know, I don't believe you. I don't believe you can actually change your sex, and I don't believe you can actually change your race. You know, you're born as you are. But really, that's why I refer to transgenderism, or however you would like to call it, as gender dysphoria. You know, like it is a problem, and even fully transitioned people, I would say, must be unhappy, because if you have to strive so differently from where you began, are you really happy? Are you?
I don't know. I can't answer that question, and I think you should know. I don't think you're allowed to judge you. Tell us if you need help getting out of jail. Thank you.
All right.
As we mentioned, one group thinks we can fix the world's problems by abolishing all countries and borders and implementing a single global democracy. That group is back on the program, for real this time. We'll be right back. The Trump administration has announced it will pull the United States out of a UN immigration compact. Some people dislike all borders, though. Peter Sherman founded the group One Global Democracy. It advocates for abolishing borders and countries. He rejoins us now. Great to see you, Peter. Sorry about that. So I just wonder, why now? It seems like the rest of the world is moving in exactly the opposite direction. You had Brexit, you got the Catalonian separatists. Around the world, you're seeing things become disaggregated. People don't want to be part of big organizations anymore. You're saying the answer is a global government. Why?
So, hey, Tucker, thank you for having me on the show. One Global Democracy is here to create a new conversation about how we can make a better future for everyone by dissolving separate countries and international borders and giving everyone worldwide an equal voice in handling the big issues that affect us all, like climate change, which of course is the major cause of those tragic wildfires in Southern California, like inequality, which is hollowing out the middle class, as you covered last week, and like unlocking the doors to economic opportunity for everyone. We have a super powerful new video that makes the case for this on our website at oneglobaldemocracy.com, and I encourage everyone to check that out.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage him too, because I think it's an interesting idea, but it seems very anti-democratic to me. People don't want this. They've never wanted it. The League of Nations had to be imposed on them. Same with the UN, the EU. Like, actual people don't want to be ruled from a great distance by people who don't speak the same language or have the same history or values. They don't want this. They never have wanted it. Why do you think otherwise?
Well, the key distinction here is between being ruled and democracy. Now, democracy is about everyone having an equal voice, and we don't have that today. International borders and separate countries are getting in our way. You know, our current patchwork of separate countries dates back more than 350 years to the days when horse travel was the state of the art for communications. An awful lot has changed since then. You know,
No, if
Isaac
I can
Newton
just if I can
articulated
correct
the laws
you.
of physics.
Wait, but no, but people have always had different countries, not nation states, but they've always had, going back to the very beginning of time, tribes, distinct groups that have different rituals and customs, cultures, languages. People aren't all the same, and maybe that's why this would never work. Does that worry you?
Respectfully, Tucker, I disagree. You know, and that's what's so exciting about this moment in history where we are right now. Because right now, for the first time in human history, we have an opportunity with new technology to actually implement a global democracy for the first time. So much has changed since we first had the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 or whatever it was. You know, we've had the laws of physics articulated. We've had domesticated electricity. We've had the arrival of the internet and now blockchains.
But none of that changes.
Massively changing the world.
But why would you want to? But why would you want someone in a country you've never been to making decisions? I mean, presumably, if it's a one-man, one-vote democracy, then, like, the Chinese, with whom you have nothing in common, would be making decisions that affect you. Why would you want that?
Well, as a matter of fact, you know, one person, one vote. You'd be surprised, actually. If you look at the available international polling data, it is really surprising how much in common we have with people all over the world. Even if you look at the major population centers like China and India and Islamic countries, it is truly surprising
how many countries have you been to,
we have in
Peter?
common in terms of values.
Okay.
Quite a number. Quite a number.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Enough to disagree with you, but thank you. Millions of people use Airbnb to rent rooms. Now some users are discovering hidden cameras spying on them. How's that for creepy? Whoa. We'll tell you how to protect yourself next. Several Airbnb users have made horrifying discoveries recently. Cameras hidden inside the bedrooms of their rentals. Pretty disturbing. How do you know if your rental room has a hidden camera, and what do you do if you find one? Lance Yulnoff is editor-at-large at Mashable. Whitney Bone is a criminal defense attorney. They join us tonight. So, Lance, how do you know, do you really want to know, if there's a hidden camera in your Airbnb?
Yeah, you want to know. So you got to take a good look around. Look at screw heads. Honestly, they put cameras inside of that.
Screw heads?
Yeah, no exaggeration. If you see a black dot somewhere, take a closer look. Look at your alarm clock. And by the way, if an alarm clock is sitting next to your bed, maybe throw a towel over it because you have your phone anyway. You can use that. Check if there is a motion detector pointed directly at your bed. Why would it be pointed there? So take a look at that. Also, the smoke alarm that is right over your bed, which is supposed to protect you, should. But if you see a black dot, take a closer look. Maybe even open it up. Don't break it. And if it looks weird, you might want to call someone. And the last thing you might want to do is look for hidden cameras. And you can do this with something called Fing app. It looks for the IP address for cameras around there. There'll usually be a camera outside the Airbnb. But if you've got a bunch of IP addresses, you might want to take another look. Lastly, unplug the router there. You'll live without Netflix, but you'll be safe.
That is so creepy. So, Whitney, if you find that there is a camera in the smoke alarm over your bed, what's your recourse?
Bust up the smoke alarm, but yeah. I would say definitely let Airbnb know immediately. And honestly, I would call the cops. I mean, this is an issue of peeping Toms. I mean, your right to privacy in the bedroom and in the bathroom is absolute. It's against Airbnb's policy for homeowners and hosts to have cameras in the bathrooms or the bedrooms for any reason whatsoever. Most states it's illegal, so there's no legitimate purpose for that to be happening. Not only is it in violation of that policy, but it's a violation of your right to privacy, and it's creepy.
Well, that's for sure. So, but Lance, is it avoidable? I mean, if you're staying in somebody else's house, someone you've never met, you hooked up over the internet, I mean, I guess why should we be surprised that there might be a camera over the bed?
Well, hopefully, look, Airbnb is in hundreds of countries and thousands of locales around the world. Most of these people are good, and you can read the online reviews and get feedback and find out about these people. And the point is, they really want to make the money from people staying there. There are some creeps out there, and by the way, you're not going to pull it out and find a cable that leads back to the room where they're watching you. It doesn't work that way. You'll find an SD card where they're storing the stuff so they can pick it up later.
Whitney, how do you keep it very quickly from winding up on the internet, footage of you in someone else's Airbnb?
Well, I don't know if you can keep it from winding up on the internet, but certainly if you catch on to this quickly, you have certain recourses in terms of contacting Airbnb, pursuing litigation with them if necessary to have them try to fight it, and certainly pursuing it with the police. Like I said, if all else is in doubt, go to an attorney too, and they can help you take the right recourses in terms of
These were not
trying to stop
issues
that.
when I was a kid. Lance Whitney, thank you for that. I appreciate it. What a story.
Have a
Show continues next.